Underneath Fatigue is Me. Episode number 1, Starting Places. If I had to wait till I had enough energy to do all the things that I wanted to start in life, then I probably would never do them, because I wake up with fatigue, I walk through my day living with fatigue, and I end my day and night with fatigue. My name is Jen DeTracey, and this podcast, Underneath Fatigue is Me, is something that I have wanted to do for quite a long time now. And it starts with starting. It doesn't matter how much fatigue I have. The reality is, if I don't get started on now, it won't happen. Today, I was like, today is the day I'm going to record episode number 1. And then, of course, I got busy with other things. Maybe a little bit of procrastination in there, saying, oh, well, I'm going to meditate first, but I never meditated today. So I thought, well, okay, I better record this podcast anyway. Otherwise, it won't happen. And then by the time I had lunch and washed some dishes, I thought, if I don't record it now, I won't have the energy to do it before I have my afternoon nap. So here we are together today with my first episode, my first podcast, and really the purpose of Underneath Fatigue is Me is to talk about the challenge with fatigue and how to rise above it in our lives. Because so many people experience fatigue, and it can be a real stopgap between what they want to do and what they do. And for me, certainly, there are times in my life where I mean, every day, truthfully, I have to make choices around what I have the capacity to do and what I can't. And sometimes I will have a game plan and I can't do everything that I want to do. Or then there's the other side of it where things take longer to do than expected. And so when you can't meet all of those goals or objectives or task lists, then there's the disappointment, right, that comes with that. And that happens for me as well. The reality is that my desire is to live my life fully and live it with purpose, no matter what I'm living with. Fatigue, multiple sclerosis, dyslexia, see, I can't even pronounce the word. So to me, it's about taking charge of my life. It's about acknowledging that the fatigue is there. It's that it's a layer, it's a part of my existence, but it isn't who I am. It's underneath me. And I'm on top of that fatigue, right? And I'm embracing my life fully with the fatigue and doing things that are important to me and connecting with people that I want to hear this message like you, because I want to be more connected with people like me. People like me that live with fatigue, social isolation, struggles in life because of the fatigue. And at the same time, I want to connect with people that live with fatigue that are finding ways, uncovering ways to celebrate their life no matter what. And yes, we have our bad days and we have our good days. And on those bad days, sometimes things don't happen. Yet I know for myself, I can't allow, or I don't want to allow every day to be a bad day, because then I would just do absolutely nothing. And that's just not my personality. Before I was diagnosed with MS, I probably had a low level of fatigue. It wasn't really on my radar. I didn't have to nap every day. But once I was diagnosed and had a big relapse episode, which I'll tell you about in a sec, after that, I thought the fatigue would just disappear once I recovered. And it didn't. And that was so shocking to me and heartbreaking. And there's a whole story, a separate story on that, of my spiral downward. The thoughts around that are me doing this podcast. I don't think I would have been ready for it 8 years ago when I was diagnosed. I don't think I could have. I don't even think I would have been able to get out of bed to do it at that point in time. And my life has changed, and I'm back on the rails. And now I feel more resilient and stronger and capable. And yet, over the last 8 years, the fatigue has increased. aside from supporting myself and working to do that in the way that I can, there isn't necessarily a lot of time or space for other things that are meaningful to me. And one thing that I learned from that is that my time is my time, and I've become very selective about what I do with my time and energy, and I make choices around that are important to me. And today, the important choice is recording this podcast. It's about making it a priority over other things because it's important to me, and I know that I'm going to feel good as a result of doing it. And it may not be perfect. It's my first recording, it's my first test drive, and I'm free flowing. I haven't written out a script. I have practiced something. And that's because, you know what I've discovered over time as someone who does professional speaking along those lines and loves to do that kind of stuff, is every time I have a body of work that I write and I want to present to a group, maybe because of my perfectionist nature and my insecurity around living with dyslexia and fatigue and the worry of things falling apart and the embarrassment and shame that would come with that if I wasn't able to remember on stage or in front of a group, and the horror that would come from that for me is that I have been a rehearser to give me that control or that security. And every time I rehearse, my energy drops a notch. So today, because this podcast is mine, I'm doing it to share with the world, but it's also for me. And so I'm free flowing here. I'm just letting it happen naturally. I do have a theme for today, of course, which is starting places. And I want you to think about in your life what that starting place is for you. Something that you put off over and over again because of fear, because of the fatigue being just very dominant in your life, and saying, I can't do it. I just can't. I just don't have it in me. What I found is when you are doing something purposeful, when you are living something purposeful in your life, you will find the energy and the capacity to do it. Even if it's not all the time. I could do this podcast 2 times a year. Maybe that's all I could do. And then I would say, well, I did it, right? It's not about the amount of something that you do. And sometimes there's that balance too, for me anyway, between doing something and paying for it later. I hope you can relate to this. Doing something and paying for it later versus not doing it at all and feeling the weight of that, which I think is in itself a big energy drain. So for me, I make choices around something that I know I might not feel great later physically, or I may have brain fog later physically, but in that moment, it is the most important thing for me to be doing. And I think that truly the key is what really is exciting and important to you. And how can you fit that into your life so that you feel internally, psychologically energized? And for me, it is doing this today, doing this podcast about starting places. Getting started, doing it from the beginning. I don't even know if this recording is going to sound good. I don't know if you're going to be able to hear the buzzing from my computer. But I know after I record this that I won't have a regret. I won't have a regret about doing it. In fact, I'll have a celebration because I have taken something that's been floating around in my head for a very long time, and I'm stepping into it. I'm making it happen. I'm creating it. I'm birthing it. I'm bringing it to life. And it's exciting. It's fun. And it's kind of crazy because here I am talking and it's like a little monologue. And no one's here to listen right now. It's being recorded into my computer. And then the next step is getting it out there to the world. And that's a whole nother piece. And that's a whole nother getting started. And that may not happen for a while. So when it does happen, I'll be celebrating again. And I think it's the philosophy of step-by-step process. I've spent a lot of my life feeling overwhelmed, even long before having living or being diagnosed with MS and fatigue, I look around me. I used to look around me. I remember in my 20s looking around me with my crammed life full of things and busyness and feeling completely overwhelmed. And now, living with fatigue, yes, I feel overwhelmed, but I know I can do less, and I give myself permission to do less. And that is a cool thing too. You know, I have this friend, and I was having a tough time, and he took me through, he's a coach, and he took me through this exercise where something had happened, or something was going to happen. My projection of something was going to happen that I didn't think was going to work out well for me, or something that didn't work out well for me. I won't get into the details of that now, but he said to me, Jen, what is great about that? What is great about that? And I had to list off all the things that were great about what that event was that happened in my life. And it got me thinking about how important it is to look at that other side of things, to change that message in our head. Because I certainly could walk around every day and feel deep drudgery and sorry for myself for living with immense fatigue. I could. Now, I'm very lucky, I have to admit, I can get out of bed in the morning. I am a mobile, able-bodied person to the most degree, I can say. So there's probably a little bit of me that has some disability around that. But for the most part, I'm so blessed that way. And I have a lot of gratitude around that. And at the same time, I have to keep myself in check around not feeling sorry for myself on an ongoing basis, because there's a lot of frustration for me around not being able to do what I used to do because of the fatigue, because of my energy levels, and having to plan my day in a more structured way than I've ever had to plan it before. Today, actually, I made the choice because I've had a very busy week to have a very free-flowing day. But my determination was to record the podcast. So that was my objective for the day. And I know that if I wasn't doing this right now and it didn't happen today, I would go to bed feeling quite horrible. Now, there could be a possibility that for some reason I wasn't able to do it today. And I don't even know, again, if this is recording properly, right? So I'm talking for a very long time without knowing this factor, because I've had problems with my software program this morning and I'm not a super tech. But at the same time, I'm still taking that step forward. I'm in the starting gate, and I've stepped out of the starting gate. Now, if you can't step out physically, then you can metaphorically step out, right? So my challenge for you today is this, is what is that one thing that's been nagging at you, that you have in the back of your mind, that you have put off and put off and put off because of the mantra of, I can't, I have fatigue. I can't, I have fatigue. I can't do it, I have fatigue. And what could be the first step of that you could do to actually move towards that desire that you have? One of the regrets I have, and I've done my best to let it go, but it came from a basis of having that excuse, I can't do it because I don't have fatigue, and it impacted my speaking career, was that I didn't videotape one of my key presentations, a presentation where I was getting paid to talk about my experience of living with MS from the perspective of insurance. So I had bought critical illness insurance only 18 months before I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And I tell this story to financial advisors and companies that hire me to talk about selling insurance from the client's perspective. This keynote was very popular, yet I never videotaped it. I never invested in bringing someone in. I said, I can't deal with it. I'm too tired. I had an excuse. And then at a certain point, because I didn't have that promotional video, the work dried up for me. So this thing that I was totally passionate about, excited about, getting paid to do, and getting paid well to do it, disappeared because I had the mantra, I can't do it. I have fatigue. I can't deal with it right now. And I never dealt with it, and then my business crashed out. So that was a huge wake-up call for me, a big, big learning and teaching experience, a lesson in how sometimes we have to get out of our own way and do things no matter what. So the next time I had a new speech that I was presenting to a group, I made sure to have it recorded. Did it go well? Well, it went okay. But I did it. And even if I had chosen not to take that footage, I had to edit it and put it into a demo reel, at least I would have not looked back and felt badly. And so that's what I want to challenge you with today. In a way of not challenging you, WFT, wrestling. Oh, WFT. I don't think that stands for wrestling. It's, you know what that stands for. Anyway, what the fuck, right? That's not what we're talking about here. When I'm challenging you is I want to challenge you on your thinking around that mantra and how it stops you. When what really can happen is, yes, you may live with fatigue and it may be very dominant in your life and your life may be hard. I know sometimes my life is hard. And at the same time, what I discovered in my own journey is that I have a greater capacity than I realize, even living with the monster fatigue that I live with now. And that is a huge in itself, not only acknowledgement of that, but for me a realization that I still am capable of doing things with some limitations and not with the verbose energy that I had before to get up in the morning and go until I go to bed at night and work 12-hour days like I used to, which was crazy. I don't know. I would never want to do that now. So that's my challenge for you today, is to pick something that you feel is important to you and take that first step. So that's going to be a wrap for today. Now, I know at the beginning of this podcast, I did not tell you who I was. And that is one of the things of doing something for the first time without a script. It's like, you're like, who is this person? Well, my name is Jen DeTracey. And I was diagnosed in 2010, September 19th, 2010, with multiple sclerosis. Before that, I probably had a low level of fatigue. But after I had a huge episode where my brain became very inflamed and the left side of my body was not functioning well, and I went into the hospital, and that's where they discovered the multiple sclerosis and gave me steroids to shrink the inflammation in my brain. After that, I have been living with fatigue ever since. And as I mentioned, over the past 8 years, it has increased. And that is something that I am constantly calibrating and living with. So that's a little bit about me. Let's wrap up this first podcast. Again, this is called Under Fatigue is Me, Episode 1, Starting Places. And I'm Jen DeTracey. Such a pleasure to have you along for this journey. I hope that you'll join me again. Thank you.